And good Wednesday afternoon. It is Wednesday. My name is Ryan Belmore. I'm the owner and publisher of What's Up Newp. And Mr. Frank Prosnich joins me. Hey, Frank.
How you doing, Ryan?
Been a while. Okay. Very important conversation we're going to have today.
We are. There's a huge effort to suppress voters nationwide, and it seems like we're fighting for our lives to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to vote in what we call a democracy.
And joining us is Nellie Gorbea, who is Secretary of State. And I even switched it to her favorite background here because I know she enjoys the vote symbols. So here we are. And good afternoon.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. It's great to be here with you. Thank you.
Well, it's good to have you here. And you have been an incredibly strong advocate for expanding voters' rights in Rhode Island, and I presume also speaking out beyond the state.
Yes, absolutely. Because you know what, Frank, our democracy, our government works better when we have a variety of perspectives and opinions around the policymaking table. And that starts by voting. We have to make sure that people have that incredible right to vote.
Were you surprised at the legislation that was introduced and eventually passed in Georgia?
I would like to say that I was surprised, but not really, unfortunately. There are some people who are really having a hard time recognizing that as you move towards universal suffrage, meaning that a wider variety of people can and do vote, that might lead the country in directions that they might not be as comfortable with, that they're different. They're not necessarily even worse. It's just that they're different. And I think there's just a lot of fear, unfortunately, in those communities. And we had, let's face it, 4 years of someone using the president's bully pulpit to stoke those fears. And so, I wish I could say I was surprised. I'm not.
I saw a poll the other day that showed that there are still 65% of Republicans who don't believe the outcome of the election.
Yeah, and that's really troubling. I mean, as somebody who really, look, okay, fine, I'm a Democrat, I get it, but that might be seen as like, oh, I only want to promote, sort of interests of Democrats, but as an elected official, you have to be able to represent everybody. And that there is that large a part of our community, and they are a part of our community, that somehow are doubting at a national level the past election is very, very troubling for our democracy.
Yeah, it bothers me on a lot of levels. It's not only about the election, but I saw another poll that said that 51% of Republicans believe that I can't call it anything but a riot, the insurrection on January 6th was peaceful. 5 people got killed. There's nothing peaceful about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Words have consequences. Words have consequences. And that was, I think, one of the darker moments that we've had in this country. It's just incredibly troubling how, and it wasn't just, coming out of the White House. It was also, how, technology is affecting people's behaviors. These algorithms on social media that somehow promote, people only hearing that which they want to hear, as opposed to when you are face to face with someone. I love, one of the things I love about being an elected official is that opportunity to get beyond my comfort level and circles of friends and be able to just talk with a variety of people and listen to them. And, I don't always agree with things that people tell me. But it's really important for us as elected officials to listen. It's important for us as citizens of this very diverse country to listen to each other and try to find those pieces that might connect us. And I think in some ways the technological space that we're now communicating in is just fomenting division.
I've always seen elections about ideas and about we all share, I think, a lot of the same goals, but it's how we get there, and that's where the differences are. And if we have an ability to listen to one another, we might be able to steal a little bit from one person or from another, and end up with maybe even a better package that we're able to get through. But it seems that we've lost that ability to listen.
It's really troubling. And one of the reasons why, I've been really insistent on promoting civic education as a space in which kids not only learn about their government and their history, but also, are able to think about these big topics of how do we get to those results that people want to. What are those tools that we have? And we do have the tools in this very pluralistic society. I mean, the United States is one of the most diverse, most pluralistic countries on the face of the planet. And, and clearly, our democracy, the structures it was originally founded on were really good, solid foundation, but it's had to be amended. 100 years ago, right? Women were able to garner the right to vote. They earned, the right to vote through a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. Now, as that turns out, that only granted it really in practical terms to white women. It wasn't really until the 1960s, the Voting Rights Act, that a lot of the restrictions and limitations and barriers to women of color and people of color were able to be lifted with the Voting Rights Act. So we have a democracy that has been changing over time, and I think we find ourselves in one of those moments of sort of a real strong sort of inflection moment where I hope we will come out of it. I mean, the people who were around in Rhode Island at the time of the Doors Rebellion must have felt like the world was also ending. So sometimes these are tough times that get us to the other side.
So am I correct that there are 43 states that have voter suppression legislation that's been introduced?
It's some incredible number like that. And there are hundreds of bills, including here in Rhode Island, which is really, appalling to me, because I think, this election, not just because, I participated in leading it, but also because of all of the people that are involved, proved to be an exceptional series of proofs that our elections are run well.
What are some of the bills or some of the things that have been introduced in Rhode Island?
Well, they want to change the way the voter ID law is used, so that you use it into mail ballots. There's also an attempt to keep. I mean, I have a proposal that does the opposite, which is I want to get rid of the 2 witness or notary requirements on mail ballots. And there's a push to not allow that to happen on a permanent basis. We've been doing it under executive order. That having 2 strangers show up at your house to tell you, hey, we realize you have a mail ballot, let us witness your signature, is not a security measure. Quite the contrary. What's a security measure is allowing that person to not just receive that mail ballot, but fill it out on their own, in their own home, on their own privacy, put a pre-postage stamped envelope like I've been doing since 2018, and allow that person to either put it in the mail to go back or have it dropped in one of the many drop boxes that the State Board of Elections has installed in every single community. That gives the voter the independence to make sure that their vote is going to get through without obstruction. And then, there's a checks and balances process by a bipartisan pair of officials that reviews the information on that mail ballot oath envelope. So we don't need, 2 people coming mostly from campaigns to come and check out, who needs help with their mail ballot.
Yeah, and I think that was the real question. So what if we don't require the voter ID? What kind of safeguards are there that prevent fraud?
For mail ballots, I mean, it's literally the examination of the oath envelope by the Board of Elections. And actually, there's 2 steps in that checks and balances. One is there's a check at the local level. The application for a mail ballot, because right now you have to apply for it, is reviewed by a local city official at the Board of Canvassers. And then if that passes, if they check the signature and it matches the address, all the information, then that person is sent the mail ballot. Then the person fills it out, fills out an oath envelope, and again has to put their name, their address, and their signature. And then that signature is verified against what we have on the voter registration database. So there is a lot of checks and balances. There are states like Washington State, Oregon, Colorado that do all mail ballot elections. And Democrats are elected and Republicans are elected. This is not a partisan tool. This is a tool that allows a wider variety of people to be able to vote safely and securely from their home.
Of course, Colorado is under a microscope now because the Major League Baseball has moved the All-Star game out of Atlanta to Colorado, and I hear Republicans saying, well, in Colorado they require some kind of a identification form or whatever, but it's altogether different between the two states.
Very, very different. Very different. And both, I mean, are you saying for ball games? I mean, like really, ball games are not a constitutional right.
No, I mean for voting. So in Colorado, I believe that you can use a utility bill or something like that in order to verify who you are.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, the devil is in the details. Every state has a series of rules and regs that make it different. I think what happened now in Georgia is just beyond the pale, though. I mean, to make it, some sort of crime to give people water in a line as they're waiting to vote. I mean, seriously, it defies sort of humanity. I mean, it's terrible.
So one of the things I don't understand, in thinking about a couple of things in that Georgia law, I guess it's law.
It is.
Are they regulating the length of the lines at polling places?
So they're trying to limit the crowds, but in order to do that, I mean, you shouldn't be making it harder for people to vote, which is the problem. That's really the issue here. So, how people are able to get, like, again, Georgia, different sort of landscape than Rhode Island is. Not everything is as close over there. So, how you're able to control who has access to voting is done through not by saying, oh, you are white and you can vote, or you're black and you can't. It's like, oh, you're black and you happen to live in a faraway community, and now you have to travel certain distances to get to a polling location. You're just making it harder for people to vote, which is unfair and very un-American, to be honest. I mean, stop worrying so much about rigging elections and with these rules, and just make your case to the people and win your elections fair and square.
They also, what they were doing prior to this, of course, is there were fewer voting machines at polling places that basically were used by minorities, and the lines were longer, the waits were much longer. That happens across the country.
Yeah. I feel really blessed that I'm here, that I've been able to be a really strong defender of democracy, and that Rhode Island has shown the way on how to do safe, secure, and modern voting options to our citizens. Like, our government delivered the kind of elections. And by the way, we've done 4 elections in less than a year and a half, because we started with the presidential preference primary in the pandemic. Then we had the statewide primary. Then we had the general election, which was, as I call it, the tsunami of elections. And all of this in a pandemic. And then we had to do the March bond referenda question. Right. So, and we're headed into May 4th. Which not only is Rhode Island, for short term, the Rhode Island Independence Day, as a lot of people call it. It was our act of renunciation day. It's also going to be an election day in several communities. So we've been on this election after election after election, and there has been nothing except high satisfaction from voters. And I tell you, I go to the grocery store, people tell you stuff when you're in elected officials, because I know, because I've seen it happen to others. But I go into the grocery store and I'm wearing a mask, and people still will come up to me and say, thank you for the work that you did with the election. I was so happy to vote on election day, vote from home, but it doesn't matter, or vote early in person. Everybody loved the fact that they could choose how they wanted to vote and how they could keep themselves safe.
What do you hear from secretaries of state across the nation? And what is your reaction, and maybe the reaction of others, to Georgia basically stripping the Secretary of State of his powers?
Yeah, no, I mean, again, it's appalling. For those of us who are Democratic secretaries of state, the Republican secretaries of state have an association, and so do the Democratic Association of Secretaries of State have their own group. And I'll say, I mean, we're very troubled by what's happening in Georgia. But again, I'm hoping that just like the Door Rebellion back in the day here in Rhode Island, or in California, where in the you and I are both old enough to remember the 1990s in California under Pete Wilson were very, very tough times on immigrants, for example. And it finally came to a head with Proposition 186, which was then overturned by the courts. And that anti-immigrant activity led to great awakening within the immigrant community in California, so that now, 30 years later, you see a California that truly reflects the diversity of the state in its elected officials, in that you see people being elected from all different communities. In fact, even our own vice president, right, who's the first Asian American and Indian person from India that was elected in addition to a woman vice president. So I'm hopeful that all of this is just some really tough times before we get through it. I hope that the courts find huge problems with the Georgia law and that they set some balance back into play.
I think one of the encouraging things after the election and all of the claims of there being fraud was the fact that our courts, no matter whether they were Republican judges, whether they were Trump-appointed judges, whether they were the Supreme Court, all acted responsibly in the way that we would want our courts to act, and not just play politics.
Yeah, I mean, we had a case here in Rhode Island, which I defended all the way up to the Supreme Court to ensure that we could, under the executive order, eliminate the witness notary requirement to vote by mail. And that was right at the time. It was the U.S. Supreme Court. And they said, no, Rhode Island can do that. So this is, we're hoping that the courts continue to do the right thing as they have, which is really to strike a balance from the partisanship that is taken over some places.
Yeah, and I guess my own personal message to people is that if you're living under those restrictions, and if they hold up, find a way to vote and make sure you vote in sufficient numbers and vote those people out who in fact sponsored that or voted for that legislation.
Yeah, who apparently don't want everybody to be able to vote, which is
correct. But am I also correct that the Georgia law allows the legislature to basically overturn the vote? Am I right with that?
It's a very big bill, and so I haven't studied all the nuances of it. But it's really taking a very strong anti-democratic bent on people's ability to vote. It does allow the Republicans to handpick the people in charge of disqualifying the ballots in Democratic leaning places like Atlanta. So in that sense, it basically is controlling sort of what happens in the election in the end, which is really terrible when you think about it. It's so ripe for abuse to have the members of one party saying, hey, yeah, you have to disqualify these particular ballots.
Now, I presume that you're pretty confident that no voter suppression bills are going to make it through our legislature.
Thankfully, yes, although we're fighting really hard every single day to make sure that everything's going to stay the way it is. But yeah, I think, again, I've had Rhode Islanders from all walks of life thank me for all of the improvements. In fact, some of them have told me, oh my goodness, I really loved early in-person voting. Is that going to still be an option next time I go vote? And I'm able to tell them, yes, the General Assembly did pass legislation last year. It was one of the few pieces of legislation passed. It was something that I've wanted to do since day one as Secretary of State. And finally, it took a pandemic. and we were able to get it passed. And so 20 days of early in-person voting is the rule now going forward.
I wanted to switch just a little bit to the May 4th election. And these are some important, for these communities, some important bills that are there. How are they going to have sufficient polling places in these communities to make it comfortable for people to come out to vote? And I go back to Westerly a couple of years ago when they had a referendum on a school bond issue of $70-some-odd million, and they had 2 polling places in the entire town, town hall and one other spot. They may have had extended voting in those areas, but for some people that becomes an inconvenience, and they had a very low voter turnout.
Yeah, I think though overall though, Frank, so each community has the ability to petition to the Board of Elections to have fewer polling locations open. Usually special elections, I'm sad to say, don't garner that much participation from the community. I'm hoping that with people now understanding that they can do voting from home and that they have this early in-person voting option, that will increase voting in special elections. So it is common to communities to then say, hey, if we're not going to have like as many people as we usually do to vote, can we consolidate some of the polling locations? But all of that needs to be done with great care, as you say, because we want to make sure that in that consolidation, we're not unintentionally disenfranchising people. So I know that organizations like Common Cause and the ACLU look very closely at these petitions, and they're done in an open manner. They're done in a petition to the Board of Elections. And so if people have concerns about a polling location that's going to be closed or the distance to a certain polling location, there is an avenue for you to express those concerns. And I really urge people on the ground to make their voices heard at these public hearings. It really does matter.
Tell us a little bit about this Rhode Island, the Let Rhode Island Vote Act. What does it include, and what do you hope it accomplishes?
Yeah, no, I'm part of this. I've joined this coalition that is proposing this great legislation. It's almost a smorgasbord of stuff that some of which we were able to get done by executive order, and just making sure that we put things in place going forward. Now, prior to this, we were able to do a lot of things to upgrade Rhode Island's voting infrastructure. So we did things like new voting machines on voter-marked paper ballots, online and automated voter registration, electronic poll books, and of course, a brand new state-of-the-art central voter registration system. So putting all of that work ahead really helped us deliver and plan for a safe and secure election in the pandemic. What the legislation now does is to continue the progress and sort of solidifies some of the pieces that we had to improvise because of the pandemic, which actually turns out are a good thing. So in addition to supporting things like what I spoke about, the removing the notary restriction and the 2 witnesses restriction on mail ballots, it will do things like establish a permanent mail ballot list. Look, if you want to vote from home from now until the day you die, why do we have to, if we have an online voter information portal, why can't you just go on the same portal that you go on to basically say, I would like a mail ballot to permanently come to me going forward? That should be it's easily done technologically and procedurally, but we need a law that allows us to establish that. So establishing a permanent mail ballot list that you don't have to update every single time there's an election or a special election, and I forgot, and now the deadline's passed, and now I have to go in person. Allowing voters whose mail ballots were postmarked by election day to count. There was a lot of conversations around, mail ballots not getting in on time because of the problems at the U.S. Postal Service. So this piece of the law would allow any mail ballot that's postmarked by election day to count as long as they're received within 3 days of the general election. not like 5 days, not like a month later. No, it has to be postmarked and then within 3 days received. Right now, even if you put it in the mailbox and then it gets postmarked on election day, if it doesn't get into the Board of Elections by 8 p.m., your vote will not be counted. And again, I think it's part of making sure that people's voices are heard to include that. And then we want to make sure that we also establish a permanent voter information hotline. This is something that I did for the November election, which was a great idea. This would ensure that every secretary going forward is going to do this as well, which is to have this voter information hotline that provides access to election information. And in November, we did it with great success with the United Way and established the first one of the first 211 lines dedicated to elections in the whole country. So I think that those are really, solidly good proposals that are part of that Let Rhode Island Vote Act that everybody should support. So if anybody's seeing this and or hearing this, if you can let your state senator or state rep know that the Let Rhode Island Vote Act is a good step in the right direction, I would encourage you to do so.
What other legislation is your office supporting or sponsoring?
So we're looking at some things are outside of the elections wheelhouse. We're looking at having changes in the business services law so that if nonprofits want to merge or reconstitute themselves, that's done more easily. Those, again, are very legalistic things, but they hold organizations back because there's no easy way to do it. So we want to make sure that we update our merger law. I want to make sure that remote online notarization is available going forward as well. That was highly successful program that was instituted under executive order because the pandemic made it hard to notarize documents, even when you were dealing with timely things like estates or wills or land transactions or real estate sales. If you couldn't have the person see the notary in person under our current law, like you couldn't notarize that document legally. So remote online notarization provides a technologically secure way in which you can have the notary in one place and the person who's signing in a different place. And they go through a series of verifications to prove that the person is who they say they are and that they're signing this under their own free will. And therefore the document is able to be notarized and the transaction is allowed to proceed. So we did that under executive order. We now want to make sure that it's the law in Rhode Island so that there's no problems going forward. So those are a few of the things that we're putting forward, Frank.
Are there other things that you think, or I have one last question, but I'm going to wait until I ask you whether there are other things that you'd like to mention this morning.
No, yeah, actually one major piece of legislation, which is surprisingly important, I think. Most people don't recognize how the way we store government records is like a lifeline to government transparency. And our Public Records Act and our State Archives Act were both written like more than 30 years ago. Now think about that. Think about the technology and how it's changed. Yeah. So a reporter or a citizen wants to find out what's happened with a particular project, and suddenly they ask for emails. Well, right now the law doesn't refer to the storage of emails. And so what we have is a variety of hodgepodge kind of procedures across state and local government. My modernization of those statutes gives a guide plan for the Department of State to help local cities and towns, to help the state government preserve important historic documentation within a certain time period and provides clear rules of the road so that we can hold our government accountable, whether it's today or 5 years from now or 10 years from now.
When I first arrived in Rhode Island to work at the Providence Journal, we had a news library. We called it the morgue. It was all paper.
Yep.
It was all paper. You won't find that anymore.
I know.
So my last question for you this morning is we are a little over a year and a half, year and 3/4 away from the next election. You are term limited. as are a number of our general officers. Have you made up your mind on what you're going to do?
I'll having an announcement on that soon. I have been flattered that, regular Rhode Islanders, when I go to the hardware store or the grocery store, have not only thanked me for the work that I'm doing, but also out of their own just spontaneous sort of will say to me, "Hey, Nellie, you should really be our next governor." And so I'm thinking about that very seriously, and we'll be having an announcement hopefully soon enough. But it's wonderful. It's because for me it's less about Nellie Gorbea. It's about the fact that we've been able to deliver government to Rhode Islanders in a way that they feel works for them. And that's what we need. We need government to be there to support our small businesses, our students, our Rhode Islanders, in a way that lets them go about the lives that they want to lead.
And Nellie Gorbea, thank you very much.
And
we look
Frank,
forward to that announcement.
Yes, and I have one question, and it could be easier or it could be harder for the secretary. Open meetings, we have gotten accustomed to being able to attend any meeting we want from the comfort of our home. I attend so many meetings per day, and I've seen so many more people get involved with local city and government meetings. Post-COVID, what do you think we can do about keeping those doors and windows open?
So my team is actually looking at this right now. I think, yes, that hopefully we'll be able to preserve, that kind of openness and access. As somebody who loves government access, I think it's great. The challenge that it does present to us in government is what happens after that one meeting? How do we store that in a way that's accessible, right? So if you create it, what happens to it after that? Does it get stored in YouTube where we don't know whether we're going to have access to it, 5 years later because it get monetized and they decide to chuck it? Or, the truth is that right now there are no easy technological solutions for the storage of all of the data, all of the videos that are being generated. I don't necessarily believe that should be the thing that knocks it out, but it is something that I have to be honest, we're struggling to figure out how to go about it going forward. But I agree with you. I mean, it's been a great teaching tool. It's been a great access tool within what's been a really lousy year in many, many ways. It's one of the few silver linings.
It is. It's been one of the positive things that have come out of this, seeing more people get involved in zoning board meetings or dog park meetings. It's been truly fun to see. So, Frank, that's all I had, my man.
Well, and I'm good too. Secretary of State Nellie Gorbea, thank you very much for being with us this morning.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you. We'll talk to you soon. All right, Mr. Prosnitz, and great chat as always. I just want to, Secretary of State talked about, you can go to sos.ri.gov. And of course, it is not just the May 4th election isn't for all communities in Rhode Island. It's just a select 4. But you can find out more about what her office is doing: open government, civics and education, elections and voting, business services, notary public, state archives, and more. So it's a good place.
It's a great website. And go to that civics area and education area. There are pieces on all kinds of things that are just really some interesting reading, some things out of the archives. I enjoy going to it, and we've used some on What's Up Newp.
Absolutely. All right, Mr. Prosnitz. Well, I like that interview, and it was a good time had, and lots of great information. And you heard it here maybe first, that there could be an announcement coming soon.
That's right. A big announcement coming soon.
Big announcement, and I doubt it will be. I can't even make a joke about what it could be about right now, but
we can imagine, right?
We'll keep an eye on that. All right, Mr. Prosnitz. Well, take care.
Thank you, Ryan. You take care as well.
And on behalf of Frank Prosnitz, as well as myself and all of us here at What's Up Newp, we thank Secretary of State Nellie Gorbea for taking the time to join us today for a great chat. I'll be honest, one of the politicians that is always the first to say yes. When would you like to chat? And she's always ready and available for us. Her website, sos.ri.gov. Thanks for watching.